Welcome to the USS Silversides Submarine Museum. My name is Wes O'Donnell, and I am the Executive Director. Also a 101st Airborne Division veteran, which makes me happy to be in the room with so many screaming eagles. I wanted to remind everybody that we are not tax funded. We receive all of our revenue from admissions and donations from patriots like you. So please keep that in mind. Every little bit helps keep us alive, helps keep our mission alive of honoring veterans. Okay, now to something fun. How many people in this room have been on a Vietnam-era PBR, Vietnam-era riverboat? 1, 2? So we have one coming to the museum in the spring. We're going to park it right in front of the USS Silversides. And so keep that in mind. You guys are going to be able to be in an exact working original PBR. We're going to drive you up and down the channel and scare you to death. Okay. The PBR?
We don't know what it is on the internet, but we don't know what it is.
The PBR, a Vietnam-era river patrol boat.
Okay.
Yeah. Mark, what's the armament on that?
A twin 50 gun mount, a single 50, an M60, and a grenade launcher.
Okay, so a lot of firepower. Yeah, and we're going to have it all working shooting blanks just to scare over all the homeowners up and down the channel. So, okay, and we have a real quick announcement here.
Hi, my name is Connie Nesberry. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a limited licensed psychologist. I just want you to know that I'm facilitating a group for veterans peer support group out of Disability Network the second Wednesday of every month at 1 o'clock. Just show up. You're all welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, and as is tradition here at the USS Silversides, will you please stand as we say the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. All right, Neil Mullally. I'd like to throw it to Neil Mullally to introduce our special guest for tonight.
My name is Neil Mullally, for those who don't know me, and I'm a board member here at the museum. I'd like to mention the chair of our board, Mark Frizzackerly, is here tonight. Thank you, Mark. Wes did not mention on the PBR that before we can have it running around the channel, we have to have it restored. So we got, and Mark is in charge of that. He's taking that on as a project. So the engine's got to get running. It's got to be painted. It's got to be all kinds of stuff being work done to it. And those things were fiberglass, and there's got to be some work done there. So in any event, right, Mark, we're looking for volunteers. How many are from Muskegon? Okay, we're looking for volunteers. It's a very nice warehouse where it's being worked on. And then secondly, we're looking for donations. So if you can't work on it, we certainly can use some donations, and we'll be keeping track of. We'll be having some sort of recognition for people who are making donations. And if you want to make donations to the museum or for the PBR specifically, or for this lecture series for that matter, again, we are always, anything you can do to support the lecture series, see Wes, and he'll take care of that. Now, another thing that's happening, Wes has got this strange-looking little camera going here. And Wes, why don't you take 10 seconds, are you able to, and tell folks what's going on? We're really excited about it.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. So, in my last life, I ran a military website called warriorlodge.com, and I also manage a Facebook page with about 100,000 followers. All of them are active duty, veterans, or people who are thinking about joining the military. And so what we're doing with this camera, we're trying an experiment. We're actually live streaming this lecture to those 100,000 military individuals on Facebook. So no pressure, guys. Good. All right. Good. Thank you, Jim.
All right. Thank you very much, Wes. When this program first came up, I talked to a great friend of our museum and a great personal friend, Joe Byerly II. Where's Joe? Joe's here tonight. Joe, too. And his father's exhibit is down at the other end of the museum. He's the only veteran American soldier to have fought in both the American Army and the Red Army, the Soviet Army in World War II. And that's such a unique story. We have an exhibit about that here at the museum. And I had met before Bruce Whipple, and I had not met Chris Brady, who has written one of the best books on Firebase Ripcord that is in existence and is going to be for sale here tonight. And he's even going to, for an extra whatever, sign him, right, Bruce? I'm sorry, Chris. No, I'm just kidding. And he has his beautiful daughter, Catlin, with him, all the way from Pennsylvania. So thank you. Let's give Catlin a round of applause for coming all this way. And another friend of ours heard about this and got really excited, Professor Jim Smither from the history department at Grand Valley State University. And Jim, Dr. Smither, has spoken here at the museum. One of his primary interests is Vietnam, the Vietnam War, and he's interviewed many, many of you here, I think, Vietnam veterans. He's the official Library of Congress Vietnam History Project person for Western Michigan. So Jim has worked with both of these gentlemen, and he's excited to be able to introduce them, and I want to have Jim come forward and present these fellows to us.
I want to say before I begin here, I've been working with people at the museum now for the better part of 10 years, or a lot of its existence, and I've kind of seen the growth, I've seen the development of programs, and I work with a lot of local museums and organizations and things like this. And I just have to say, I'm really very impressed by what goes on here. You got the quality of the exhibits, the facilities, and so forth, the programming they do, and on top of that, they are doing it without any public funding. It's kind of like being in a state university in Michigan where we don't really get any public funding either. 13% now, yeah. But anyway, we're still there, we're still working. Now, I run the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project, which means I do oral history interviews with veterans of all eras, from World War II down to the present, including people who were not actually in shooting wars. If you've been in the service, we want to talk to you. We record the interviews on video. They go up on a website along with detailed outlines that helps researchers anywhere on the planet find your story and find out what you talk about and where you do. And while not long after I got doing this, I ran into a fellow named Jeff Wilcox, who was someone who was on Firebase Ripcord in 1970. And he told me this rather fantastic story that I'd never heard before. And he told me about Keith Nolan's book, the original book on this, which in certain ways Chris Brady's book actually supersedes. And I read that, and that was interesting, and some of Jeff's pictures were in the book, and I thought, okay, cool. Well, Jeff lives in Saugatuck, so I brought him up to my classes a couple of times. And then he said, well, we're having a reunion in Indianapolis, why don't you come? Okay. So I went down there, didn't know really anybody or what would happen, and I just started talking to people, and some guy said, sure, I'll interview, and someone else did, and then I now have 84 Ripcord interviews. I've been to 5 reunions in a row. I'm heading off now to my 6th this year in a couple of weeks. And when you talk to that many people who were involved in the same operation, you gain an awful lot of insight you would not get otherwise. Now, Bruce Whipple is one of the people that I've interviewed for this project. And over the course of coming down there to the interviews, we actually interviewed Chris Brady's father, Bruce Brady, and found out about the book. And so when Chris is doing the sort of the history context part of his book, he'd send the stuff to me, and I'd look at it and send it back, and couldn't tell him that much because he's good. All right. What I want to do just for a couple of minutes is give you a little bit of broad sort of history professor background, if you will, for Ripcord. And then turn it over to these gentlemen. Bruce can kind of tell his story, and Chris can fill in a lot of the rest. A lot of you have probably heard the line about how, well, we won all the battles in Vietnam and kind of lost the war. And there's some truth to that. I mean, the biggest campaign of the whole thing is the Tet Offensive. Well, we won that. but you'd never know that from the way that got reported elsewhere. And a lot of the other larger engagements, Quezon, places like that, certainly the Americans and South Vietnamese won them. However, an awful lot of the war was political, and we couldn't really control particularly what the South Vietnamese government was going to do or not do. And a lot of the war wasn't big battles at all. It was ambushes, it was no-name fights, it was small skirmishes, or it was big operations where we didn't find anybody. So it's a little more complicated than that. But still, if you look around for something you want to call a battle, well, we did kind of lose one of them. And it was a battle for a place called Firebase Ripcord in 1970. And it's a place where 2nd Battalion, the 506th Regiment of the 101st Airborne was the main unit involved, but other units were in and out at different times in support. And ultimately, Ripcord was a case of the United States no longer having the manpower or the willpower to do what it was going to take to actually win a major action against the North Vietnamese. And if you know your Vietnam history, you think in 1970, you think of Cambodia. And the Cambodian incursion involved elements of multiple US divisions and a lot of South Vietnamese, a bigger operation, that got the attention. But overlapping with that, you had the 101st in the far northern part of South Vietnam battling around this particular hill where we'd set up a fire base. And the odd thing about it was that the bad guys, instead of eventually going away when we shot back, kept showing up in larger and larger numbers and essentially besieging the fire base and bombarding it. And ultimately, at the moment when we had tapped into their communications, the brigade commander had figured out how to go about actually winning the battle. If you give me these troops, he has the plug pulled on him, and we have to abandon the place in a rather spectacular helicopter-borne evacuation. Now, along the way, over the period of several months, there are all kinds of small firefights and ambushes and patrols and things going on, many, many different stories among all of the different units. Anyone looking at trying to write a book about this is going to have a very difficult time. And Chris, on top of this, was trying to write a book that people could actually understand. See, as an academic, I don't have to do that. But he does. And he's really quite successful. And he basically did it by talking to a lot of the guys who were there. And so you get a lot of those individual stories woven together in a way that really works very well. Okay, well, that's sort of your big picture. So I guess at this point, I want to turn this over now to Chris and to Bruce. Again, Bruce is going to give you his own eyewitness view of things, and Chris much of the rest. Thank you.
My name is DJ Hilson, your Muskegon County prosecutor. I urge you to vote for Michael Poulin for Muskegon County Sheriff. He has served Muskegon County as a professional law enforcement officer for 29 years. Through his training and experience, he has dedicated his career to community-based programs. I am confident that his proven leadership and his dedication to community makes Michael Poulin the most qualified candidate for Muskegon County Sheriff.
I'm Michael Poulin, and I approve of this message.
Hello, my name is Joe Bush, and I'm a candidate for Muskegon Probate Court Judge. As a husband and a father, born and raised with strong family values here in Muskegon County, I pledge to work hard for everyone if I'm elected. Probate judges protect individuals and families who are unable to protect themselves. That's why we need a judge with compassion, integrity, and experience. I have over 20 years of trial experience in family and probate courts, nearly 3 times that of my competitor. I've also been endorsed by the entire probate court and 2/3 of the sitting family court right now, and I'm the only candidate endorsed by the judges. And the reason the judges have endorsed me is because they know I have the compassion, integrity, and experience for this important position. All jobs are important. This job requires someone who's qualified. On November 8th, I ask you to turn your ballot over and vote for the most qualified candidate. Vote for Joe Bush. Thank you.
I'm Pat Schaefer, and I know it takes a special temperament to be a judge. The decisions a judge makes can seriously alter people's lives. Casting your vote for this position is incredibly important. I've known Jeff Nolan for over 20 years, and I know he will make decisions based on reason and common sense. I know he's the best candidate. Please join me in voting Jeff Nolan for District Court Judge.
I'm Jeffrey Nolan, and I approve this message.